people ask me all the time. Sometimes people have a hard time pronouncing the name. It's a little bit different. Yeah, I know this is a passionate story of yours. I know it's a really cool story. If people get an opportunity to meet with Ken, have him tell you the full story. But tell me the story of Konexial.
I'm going to tell you the abbreviated story
Yes, the
about how the name came about.
yes,
So,
abbreviated story and what it means and what it means.
so the name actually came about. I was looking for a name back. I think we mentioned early on this podcast that I wanted to start a logistics technology company at Coke. And so one of the company names we'd come up with was, we thought, how about Cogistics? That was Coke and Logistics. And we investigated, and the lawyer said, nope, can't do it. Somebody's Cogistics with a C, we'll get sued. So I had to come up with another name, and I started working on it. And I always admired Steve Jobs. And when he lost his CEO job, he was kicked out as a founder at Apple. He went on to found Next Computers. What most people don't know is that Next Computers, the software that they had, the operating systems that they had, are what are driving the growth of Apple and have ever since. So OS 10 and iOS and Watch OS, all of those are built off the Next technology. So I liked that concept of having Next somewhere in the name. I found an institute called the Nexial Institute that had stopped using the name. I thought, well, there's Nexial. That's an interesting word. It means kind of coming together from different perspectives. And I put the KO in front of it for Coke, and I thought, oh, Konexial, that could work.
Sounds amazing.
And long story short is we got approval to start a company at Coke, and I wanted to call it Konexial, and was lobbying for that, and was told by the
It
president.
was lawyer approved, right?
Lawyer approved. They'd already done all the work on it, and the president at Coke Industries said, "You got the green light to start this business. What are you going to call it?" And I said, "How about Konexial?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't like that." I'm like, "Why don't you like it?" "Well, that sounds too techy. I want a normal name." So the normal name became KBX for them. But I'd already done all this work on this name. I'm like, if I ever start a company, I've got the name. But
And what does the name mean to you?
what it's come to mean to me is inside the name you have connecting one to all. And so the idea here is that we can take all of the assets and drivers and people in logistics or a supply chain, and we can help to connect them together in a frictionless environment. So to me, it's about having one platform that can connect all this stuff together and make supply chain come alive. In fact, we talk a lot now about live supply chain and how do you actually control things live as they happen and help people communicate live. So that's kind of what's in the name for me.
So when you look back at things over the course of your career here at Conexial, and you think of challenges or failures, could be a big lost deal, disappointment, it could be an issue at work. What do you think was the moment where you had that experience and then it made you a better leader?
That's a really good question. The one that comes to mind. So no one starts a company and it doesn't go up and to the right
Are
all
you
the
sure?
time. Pretty sure. After 9 years, but I think the one that sticks out for me is we started this company with a vision that, hey, we're going to get hundreds of thousands of truck drivers using our technology. We're going to market to the mass public, and we're just going to be that kind of a company. Kind of like creating tools for social media and that kind of stuff, and technology to help the drivers. And I think what we realized is after a couple of years' work and trying to build what we wanted to build, which was this ability to interact with drivers and conduct business mobile to cloud and vice versa, we realized that really takes a lot of money, and we didn't have the brand name and the recognition that needed to actually do that.
Talk about a lot of marketing, a lot of trade shows,
Correct.
A lot of product development, a lot of developers.
It's expensive development, and it's also expensive marketing. And I think what we realized is, one, if we don't get the technology right, no marketing is ever going to help you. Okay. So we had to basically go through a transition about 2019 leading into 2020. And we kind of had to admit that, hey, the path we were on was not going to lead us where we wanted to go. And we needed to basically redo some things technically and make the product a lot better, get the performance up, get the quality up, and get the cost down. And going through that process, the other thing is that we realized is that, hey, up until that point, I'd been the strategist, the CEO, the guy helping to raise capital, those kinds of things. And we came to a point where I'm like, if we don't fix this technically, we're going to fail. And we kind of declared internally that we had failed and that we needed to do something different. And at that point, I basically, it's very humbling, right? You realize that you thought you knew what you were doing, and then things get really hard, and you're not on a path to success. And the only way you're going to change that is to admit that and to reevaluate. So we went through that process. And that's the point where I said, okay, I'm going to have to be the chief technology officer, mainly because I'm the one who has this idea about how this should work and how the developers should work. And so as we went through that, it was transformational. And you sometimes as an entrepreneur, you just have to roll your sleeves up and get in and learn stuff you don't know how to do. So I learned Illustrator. I learned, more about repos and repositories and code bases and how do you configure AWS and how do you project costs.
And you did that all in your free time.
I did that all in my free time. Yeah. So, yeah. But I think that, when I look back at that, that was middle of 2019 was a transformational year because we recognized that we had to change. I had to change, and I had to ask others to change too. And that change, what you realize is that change never stops. The only constant is change, and if you're not growing, you're dying. And so once we had some mindset changes and we made some technical breakthroughs and we got some breaks with some significant enterprise customers, things started to get a lot better, a lot more fun.
It's awesome. You are a man of faith, and you are very proud of it. And you've taught me a bunch of stuff that I used to have on the back burner. How has faith enter into your day-to-day activity at work? I know how it does it personal, if you want to talk about that as well too, but please talk about that a little bit. I think that's an important part of who you are.
Yeah. So, I am a person of faith. I mean, I guess I've known Jesus since I was 8 years old. As an 8-year-old across the river, just
in Knoxville.
In Knoxville, I grew up here. I just came to the realization that you can't be good enough, and you needed a savior. And so for a long time, I went to church with my parents, but as I have grown up and I've had my own family, it becomes even more significant because the world is constantly assailing people, and the only path forward is a path where you actually know the one who created you, and you're willing to repent of your sins. I'm as sinful as anybody. There's nothing I could do to earn my way to heaven ever. Okay, I wouldn't want anybody to look at my history. But what I realize is I don't have to be perfect. I still have issues with sin. Everybody does. I can't be good for 5 minutes.
Maybe a little bit of an exaggeration there, but
no, I mean it's serious. Everyone has these thoughts that go through your head, but Jesus came to show us the way. He came to show us the path to the Father, and basically the only way to know God the Father is to accept His Son and to let Him click and drag His holiness to you, so that when God looks at me, He sees Jesus, and take all the garbage that I've ever done, all the sin I've ever done. He clicked and he dragged it to that cross and he got rid of it. So I think, that's a big part of who I am. I mean, we want to glorify God through the business that we've created. We're not out here, proselytizing our customers or anything like that. We want the work to speak for itself. But if someone asks, I'm going to tell them the truth.
Yeah, and you should proudly, because it's who you are as a person. I mean, the things I hear is always do things the right way. Servant leadership. These are all examples of your personal beliefs and your faith coming out into the business without, talking about it.
Well, there's not a work-life balance. That's a fallacy. I mean, you have life. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
We've been given life. What are we going to do with our life? And I've chosen that I want to be where God can use me, in whatever form or fashion that is, whether it's in building a business or some other purpose. But I want to use it to His glory.
What would you say is the best piece of advice you've ever received from a friend, a coworker, a mentor, a peer? Looking back over your, was it 41 years or 55 years? I can't remember which one it is. But looking back over it, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received, personally or professionally?
The best piece of advice I've ever received. That's a good question. I think when I was in the early parts of my career, everybody thinks they know more than they do. And it's that personal, I know this and I'm right about this and that, and not taking time to listen. I worked for a guy many years later, so this is probably 15 years ago, and he just taught me that, you can be the brightest person, but you're still not going to know everything. And the only way that you're going to get to where you want to go is to help others along, to get to where they want to go. And so that realization that, hey, I may be driving and I may want to get here or there. The reality is, if I can't help the people who work with me get to where they want to go and achieve their goals, it's going to be a hard time to get there.
They say that, the optimal leader is one that focuses on their people's goals, making their people successful.
Mm-hmm.
And, other people have said it in different ways. Like I heard something a while ago, where we go one, we go all, and helping people achieve their goals. And, a rising tide lifts all boats, helps everybody get to where they want to go.
Yeah, I think that, everyone has something they want to be a part of, right? It's a question of choosing wisely. What do you want to be a part of? There are all kinds of places that you can work where it's not about building something. It's about how much money can I make doing something. And the reality is, yeah, we all have to have money to live, but it's not the end all be all. It's having more money is not going to by default make any of us happy. Now if I can make more money and I can help others make more money and they can do more things in life, they can go on more trips or vacations, or they can buy more stuff for their kids,
or create memories.
Someone told me that's probably one of the better pieces of advice is
you're welcome. See that?
You didn't say it the first time, but spend money creating memories. Don't spend money buying stuff that's, nobody's taking any of this with us, right? It's all going to be left behind.
I'll tell you, my wife's trying to find a way. She's trying to find a way.
Oh, you're being too hard on Elle. She puts up with a lot.
She does put up with a lot. And I always say my success starts at home. If she doesn't do what she does, I can't do what I do.
That is absolutely true.
So one thing that people wouldn't know at home is I was with you last year, just a little bit before this time, when the University of Tennessee's baseball team captured the national championship. We were sitting at the bar at the Marriott, non-alcoholic drinks, and we were watching the game. And there's this great image I have. I was recording you, and you put your hands up and you were ecstatic. in your memory, being a big University of Tennessee fan, what would you say are your top 2 or 3 best memories of the sports program at the University of Tennessee? I think I know what
Oh
one is,
man,
but I'll let you talk about that one.
yeah. So top top one or two.
2 or 3, whatever you want to tell us.
I would say when I was 13 years old, I used to go and escort my uncle, who was a paraplegic, to the ball games at Neyland Stadium, and they had just built the north end zone, which had handicap seating, and he wanted to go to the game. So I'm like, well, I'll push you in, and I never had a ticket, so they didn't really
Security
bother us back
requirements
then.
were not the same then as
They
they
were
are
not the
today.
same then, but my brother and I both did this. So as we took him and his friend, they're both paraplegics, and Tennessee was playing Alabama, and Tennessee had not beaten Alabama in 13 years since I'd been alive, and
And they play every year.
they play every year. And so I will never forget that game being, where I was with the people I was with, and it changed the entire town. I mean, literally, people were so happy. Every restaurant was booked. Everybody was having a great time afterwards. So I'll never forget that. And my dad was so happy. He's like, "We're all going out to dinner." So, and that never happened when I was a kid. So that's very, a significant memory.
If this podcast was put into a time capsule, people open it up 20, 25, 30 years from now, and they use whatever modern technology is to deal with our antiquated technology and figure out how to watch this thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you hope that they hear in your voice?
I hope that they hear that we tried to build a business the right way. Yes, we want results. We want performance. We want to build a great business that's profitable. But it's important the way we do it. It's not win at all cost. It's win, but the way you win is important. And that they would, hopefully people would realize that we tried to make our customers' lives better, and hopefully by then we will have made our investors' lives better, because we have a lot of people. We've got a bunch of friends and family who enabled this to happen. For years we spent a lot of money building this, and I'm looking forward to the day where I can give them that return as a steward of the money they entrusted to us, and so that they can go and do what God's called them to do with that.
I hear you talk about that a lot. I do, and I know a lot of people don't hear you talk about that. And, one of the things that is different here and attracted me to Konexial when we first met almost 3 years ago was the fact that you are so invested for the investor. The friends and family that helped you get here, right?
Right.
And one of the stories you told me was about your dad when he retired and how he was able to take his retirement, turn it into a lot more, and help
Mm-hmm.
you and help Mark, your brother, and do a lot of good stuff out there. So give me super high level, nothing specific, but your dad's very important to you in your life. Give me the story real quick about your dad and what he was able to do over his career at the phone company.
Yeah, so my dad started by climbing telephone poles, and he had a 40-year career at the phone company. When his career ended, he basically was a supervisor, and so when he retired, he decided he was going to go and invest his own money, and there weren't many people at that point that did that. So without quoting the exact numbers because it's not that important, he took a small amount and he made a very large amount over the next 20 to 30 years. And but he always led by example of it's important that you steward this money, and that you honor God with the first fruits of whatever you make, and that you give the tithe to the church or to whoever needs it. But he showed me that that was really important, and I believe that, and I think that our investors believe that as well. I think a lot of them chose to invest their money with us instead of sticking it in a mutual fund because they were looking for something that could make a difference. And My dad has made an impact not only on me but my brothers, sisters, his grandchildren, and now great grandchildren. And the world's a much better place for him having been in it.
That's awesome.
Yep.
So what a lot of people wouldn't see unless they came visit you here is your office is filled with a lot of cool memorabilia. So I'm a big fan of the Jurassic Park series, but all four of my kids have seen it. My wife has sat through it many times. Some other stuff from Star Wars and Star Treks, and you also have some cool musician stuff in there. So you've been collecting it for a little while. I see packages show up here. I see them go up on your wall. It's the one time I see you do manual labor. So tell us a little bit about that and your fascination with collecting so much cool stuff.
Well,
Autographed cool stuff.
yeah. So I've always had a a bent toward collecting things. My wife doesn't necessarily enjoy that, but no, there are just pieces of things that created memories for me. So I decided at one point that instead of yeah, everybody has investments in financial interests and those kind of things, but once you have someone pass on, like a George Lucas or a William Shatner or John Williams, who's a composer, or any of these musical acts, Michael Jackson or Men at Work, some of these more esoteric things from when I was growing up, those things don't get replicated. And so there's only X number of these things out there in the world. And I just decided, well, I need something to make the office interesting. And so I decided, okay, I'll just start buying a few things here and there. And I'm kind of a collector in that regard. But there are things that were meaningful to me at different points in my life, music that I liked or movies that I liked. And it just provides something visually interesting to look at.
Ken, I, you've talked about being a man of faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're also very unique in the fact that getting you on the phone or maybe getting someone to respond to an email might not be your strong suit. Let's just leave it at that. Okay. But how we met is really unique, both from your perspective and from my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell people from my wife and my kids and my friends that you have helped change my life, and not just professionally but personally. You bring a lot of great things to the table, and I think how we met is actually kind of an interesting story. So would you mind telling it from your perspective?
Yeah, I'll be glad to. So I rarely take any kind of cold outreach.
Never is probably the right word.
Don't even try to call me on the telephone; it ain't going to work. And I don't really do a lot of email anymore. It's not my bag anymore. But I did get, and I've been working on, we'd built all this technology, and we really knew that we had some special technology and had made some leaps over our competition. But we were really struggling with how do we grow from a revenue and a sales perspective. So I knew I needed help, and I had tried a couple of times to hire either a fractional or a chief revenue officer to help us try to figure out how to sell better, right? And I tried twice, failed twice, and then out of nowhere, I get this LinkedIn message, and I just happened to see it. And the first line caught my eye. I only work with the top 1% of SaaS salespeople. And I'm thinking, how would you know they're in the top 1%? And so
I can tell you that.
I opened the message, and it was from a guy in the UK, a recruiter,
David.
And so I'm like, okay, I'm intrigued. I'll give you 15 minutes. So we set up a call. We talked for about 15. The first 15 minutes turned into an hour and 15 minutes. He wanted to know about our company, and he wanted to know about what our challenges were. Where were we as a company? And I was very transparent and open. And he's like, hey, I helped, Project 44 and some other technology companies build sales capability. Where are you at? And I told him, I was very honest with him about, we're not that big in terms of revenue. And We really need some help there. And he became more and more convinced, and I actually showed him some of the technology we'd created on the Zoom and shared the screen with him, and I think the light started to go off for him that this is really an important company coming up. And he said, I think I can help you. I don't know that you need uh, a head of sales like a C-level person, but I think I can find someone to help you. And I thought, well, that's the last I'll hear of him. But before we hung up, I said, hey, David, you just need to understand we're a faith-based company. And he just kind of stopped and looked at me through the Zoom call. He's like, what? He's like, I knew you were a believer. And I'm like, well, how did you know that? He said, I can just tell. I mean, he said, and I've been a believer for the last 15 years. And so I don't believe that was an accident. I believe that God played a role in that connection. And he said, I'll be back in touch. Of course, I thought I'll never hear from this guy again. And so I'm going to leave the story there, and I'm going to throw it over to you. So tell your side of the story.
Yeah, I mean, I was in software for 5-6 years roughly, and my wife and I sat down and kind of, 5 years from now, what's it going to look like? And I was always an individual contributor, at least at that point in my career, and I was happy with it. We were doing well, but I knew I wanted more, and I just couldn't put my finger on it. And so I was scrolling LinkedIn one night and came across David's profile. I represent the top 1%. And I sent him a LinkedIn message. I'm like, how do you know they're in the top 1%? I'm like, well, you have to send me a W-2. And there's a certain income threshold where if you're doing well, you exceed. So I did. He's like, yeah, you qualify for it. I'm like, great. So looked at a couple of opportunities. They just didn't feel right. And I said, David, these are just slightly better jobs. Possibly I have to go backwards, go forwards. I'm not looking for a job. I'm looking for an opportunity. And he asked me to put him on a retainer and said, give me your top 6, 7, 8 things that you want to do with your career, and I'm happy to look for you. So we agreed on a number. I put him on a retainer, and um, we talk quarterly, and my wife Eleanor would always, hey, David, have anything for you? Do you have anything for you? And there was something about this next instance I had with him. It was like September of 22. I was going to be talking to him, and he just, like, we're coming out of COVID, like the money's starting to free up, companies are starting to invest. And I literally said to him, I said, so you have like absolutely nothing, like nothing. I remember my wife was my office is off of our bedroom. My wife's like, ask him again. So I said, David, you have nothing? And he's like, well, I talked to this one company. I'm like, well, that's not nothing. Who'd you talk to? And he's like, they're really small, Jerry. They're really small. You wouldn't be interested in it. I was like, can you just tell me about them? And he's just like, oh, they're a SaaS-based software company in the supply chain and logistics space. I'm like, well, I sell ERP now to manufacturers. That's supply chain and logistics. Tell me a little bit more about them. And he's just like, they're a good company. They're really small, and I just don't know if it's the right fit for you. And I said, let's go down my list. And he's like, there was one thing that they could not meet right now, and that's your income requirements. I'm like, but they meet everything else. And he's like, yeah. I was like, I'm going to ask you one more thing. Where are they based? And he's like, they're based in Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm like, David, do you know my son is a sophomore at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville? I was just like, this is God's way of saying, like, this is something that you should look at. So he's like, okay, I'll reach out to him. I'll set up a call. So he set up a call with Ken. And I'll never forget, we scheduled, I think, 30 minutes. We talked for like an hour and a half. And the only time I've ever lied to Ken was when I said, I'm actually going to be in Knoxville next week visiting my son. You want to get together for lunch? And I wasn't going to be in Knoxville that week, but as soon as he said yes, my second call was to Mario, my son. I said, I'm going to be in Knoxville next week. You want to get together for dinner? And that's what started things. And, I think that, like Ken said in part of this podcast, you have a skill set. I don't have the same skill set Ken does. And my skill set is a little bit different that I have that Ken has. And I tell you what, it was the best thing my wife ever did for my professional career. She's done a lot, but she made me ask David that question again, and led me here. So
Well, I'm glad you did decide to come here. I think that you bring a lot to the company, and I've really enjoyed getting to know you and your wife and your kids.
I appreciate that. One funny thing about that, I'll take it one step further. We have found a way to somehow talk about that a little bit to where one of our biggest prospects, we were out to dinner with them, and one of our biggest prospects that we currently have, um, and somehow that conversation came up, right? And when we told the story, I think he either at dinner or later texted you and asked you for an introduction to that recruiter, right?
Yes.
And now that recruiter is doing a lot of business with our prospect,
Right.
and helping them bring on.
Well, it's an example where you're helping other people with no expectation of
No
anything in
expectation.
return.
Yeah,
If I can help you meet somebody, then I should.
yeah. It's just crazy how things work out. I mean, you just don't plan them. I wasn't looking for anything. I was happy. I mean, I was just having check-in calls, seeing, how do I grow my career? How do I get better as a person? And Ken Evans, who never takes phone calls or
I
emails,
took a phone call.
he took a phone call, and that led to me being here. So, thank you, Ken.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate you making me a guest on your podcast.
Well, I want to thank our great marketing team here at our new podcast, Chain Reaction. I want to thank Ken Evans, CEO and founder at Konexial, for joining us on the first ever podcast. And I appreciate you guys participating. If you like it, share it. Let people know about it. We're just trying to get some interesting perspective from industry people and what they feel about today's supply chain and logistics world. So thank you. I appreciate you guys joining.
Thanks, guys.